Welcome to the Productivity Show, a podcast where we believe that you can get the important things done without having to sacrifice your health, family, and things that matter to you. In today's episode, we'll catch you up on what's been happening in our industry and new trends that you need to be aware of so you can stay ahead of the curve. And if it's your first time listening, welcome. Thanks for listening and tuning in. A quick background on the two of us here. My name is Tan Pham. I'm the founder and CEO of Asian Efficiency, where we help people become more productive at work and in life through our online courses and programs that we have. And I'm joined today by my co-host, Brooks Duncan, who is the COO of Asian Efficiency. And we both came to productivity from two completely different angles. So I started the company back in 2011 as a passion project just to kind of share what I was learning about productivity. And over time, it just turned into this business by accident. And now thousands of people listen to the show every single week and come to our blog, learn about productivity, take our online courses and programs. And this is something we've been doing since 2011. So it's been many years now, over a decade. And Brooks, I know you've been coming from a completely different angle and from a different industry and different background. Would you mind sharing with the audience, before we kick off the show here, what your backstory is?
Yeah, I guess I started my productivity journey working in the back office of my parents' jewelry store and being out helping to sell jewelry and having to do both at the same time. Eventually, I became an accountant and then a software developer. Eventually, I was director of client services for a large corporate. And then I ended up becoming an Asian Efficiency customer. And through my love of OmniFocus, ended up joining the team. And so, yeah, I definitely had a roundabout way of getting here, but I've enjoyed the podcast as a listener and now as a host. And we always want this podcast to be super actionable. We want to help people become more productive at work in our life. And sometimes we have guests like we are next week, spoiler alert, but sometimes it's just the two of us. And we always want to, like I said, give you actionable productivity tips. We love getting feedback from listeners as well. We had a feedback from Melissa. She said, "You were the first podcast that truly helped." Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Melissa. Honestly, Melissa, you did all the hard work. Tan and I really just talked. But if you want to get in touch and give us topic ideas or let us know what you think about the Productivity Show, just leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, leave us a review on Spotify, or email us at podcast@asianefficiency.com. All right, Tan, why don't you take us through in a little more detail what we're going to be talking about today?
So we have three important topics to go over today. So the first one is, imagine there was a search engine on your computer, and anytime you typed something, it would literally be able to find anything you ever did, including websites you looked at, music you listened to, the lyrics of a song. There's an app for that called Rewind, and we're going to be diving into whether this is a good idea or not, where you have everything recorded on your computer. Another thing we're going to be talking about today is productivity apps. Is it required or mandatory to have productivity apps to be productive? Do you actually need productivity apps, or can you do without them? We're going to share some hot takes on this particular topic as well. And then the final topic is Mark Zuckerberg declared 2023 the year of efficiency. What does this mean for Meta, for Facebook? What does this mean for us, for you and I? And also the bigger picture behind the economy and everything else that's going on. What does it actually mean, the year of efficiency, for all of us here that are listening to the Productivity Show? So if you're interested in diving into this, stay tuned.
All right. And like we do every single episode, we want to share our top 3 resources. And Tan, I think this time I will take it because I have 3 I want to share. Tip number 1 is called Eightlify, and that is a Chrome plugin that you can use. And what that will let you do is generate a summary of YouTube videos. And there's a free plan and a paid plan. But basically what you do is you're watching a YouTube video or you have it loaded, you hit the button in Chrome, and it will create this pretty good AI generated summary of the entire thing. So I've been playing around with it, and it's a great way to just get the gist of a YouTube video. It works mainly with long ones, but I've been enjoying that. So that's Eightlify. That's number 1. Number 2 is called eReader IQ. And I'm just going to warn you, no offense to the creators of eReader IQ, but this is a very ugly and old school looking site. But basically what it lets you do is create watch lists and get notified when Kindle books go on sale. So you can set rules for price drops, or if books go up for sale less than a certain amount, like less than $2.99 or whatever. And so I tend to buy a lot of Kindle books, but almost always I buy them on sale. I pick them up when they're like $1.99, 99 cents or something like that. And that works really well for me. So that's eReader IQ. That's number 2. And number 3, completely different, is called the Glide Gear TMP100 teleprompter. So I've been going down the rabbit hole of playing with setting up a teleprompter. I'm looking at one right now, actually. And I've tried a few different ones, and the Glide Gear TMP100 works really well. I'm using it with a webcam. It's more designed for using a DSLR, but it's working fine with my webcam as well. So you can find links to everything that we talk about on the show, these top 3 and everything else we're going to discuss, by going to theproductivityshow.com, or you can just swipe in your podcast app. And we are on YouTube. We've been posting everything we do on YouTube, breaking it up into clips. So you can go to theproductivityshow.com/YouTube or theproductivityshow.com/clips. And of course, we got to say it, like and subscribe. All right. So let's get into it. And we always like to start each episode with a roundup of just some productivity things that are going on, something that's catching our attention, that's newsworthy. And so I'm going to start, and I'm curious what you think of some of these, Tan. And the first topic I want to talk about is the AI. The AI wars are on. So we talked about AI recently in TPS441. But so much has happened since then. Google has been testing an alternative homepage that kind of does ChatGPT style prompts. And they've also released something called Bard, which is like their competitor for ChatGPT. Internally, apparently, Google has been freaking out over ChatGPT, and we can understand why if you've listened to our TPS 441 episode. And basically what they're promising to do is roll out AI to their other properties. So for example, summarizing search results and stuff like that. So it's really interesting to see what that is going to result in. But Google has been upstaged by Microsoft announcing a partnership with OpenAI. So OpenAI is the company behind ChatGPT. And basically, they've collaborated. Microsoft says, forget it. We're not going to do all the stuff ourselves. We're going to collaborate with OpenAI. We're going to bring AI into Bing, which is their search engine. We're going to bring it right into our Edge browser. And Microsoft just seems way farther ahead than Google. So the share prices have gone up for Microsoft and down for Google. So that kind of shows you how the industry has been responding to this stuff. In other AI news, in the AI wars, OpenAI, who I just mentioned, has announced a $20 paid tier with better reliability. So if you're finding yourself using ChatGPT a lot, it might be worth it for you to pay that $20 to be able to get in, because I guess our episode was so popular on AI that ChatGPT has been voted and been crashing and stuff like that. So you can pay $20 a month and just have access. And as we predicted in TPS 441, starting to be controversy over AI images, like who owns these things. So Getty, which basically owns so many different stock images and stuff like that, they're suing Stable Diffusion, which we mentioned in that episode, over images that are used in its training set. Like we said in our podcast episode, these AI tools don't just magically appear with their images and their text. They have to be trained. And Getty is saying, hey, you've used millions of our images. You haven't paid us. You've contravened the licenses. And so there's a big lawsuit. And I think there's going to be more and more of these things. And finally, schools are starting to freak out over students cheating using ChatGPT. I think this is becoming really common now that high school students and university students are figuring this stuff out. So OpenAI has released a tool called AI Text Classifier that they say can help detect AI-generated answers. Now, it's not foolproof, but it might come in handy for more than just students, maybe people applying for jobs and stuff like that. AI is just a crazy space right now. Usually I wait till the end of these these news items to ask your opinion, Tan, but since I've talked about so many crazy AI things, I just stop and get your feeling with the AI wars. What do you think of all the stuff that's going on?
I think it's very interesting to see how Google is apparently freaking out about the fact that ChatGPT just rolled out and has been taking over, and it's honestly the fastest growing company with the fastest growing user base it has ever seen in history of any app or particular tool. So it's really interesting to see how Google, who back in 2018 announced their AI technology, I remember seeing a video where they had an AI bot making a hair appointment, and it sounded so natural and cool that you just went, huh, like this is already available? And that was 5 years ago. We've been chatting about AI for the last few weeks now, and things have gone so fast. Imagine what happened in the last 5 years. So I'm actually very surprised to see how Google is so behind on their AI. And it could be a matter of fact that Google has so much stuff going on that maybe they lost focus and they're just doing too many different things. Whereas Microsoft was like the underdog, and they had maybe the foresight to see, okay, yes, we're turning a company around. Office 365 is a big thing for us, like integrating everything in our suites, but then also having the foresight to look forward and say, hey, you know what? AI is going to be taking over. We need to get ahead of the game here and get involved with this new startup, this new company called OpenAI. And I think that was a great power move. The fact that they're going to be able to integrate everything in their properties, in their software distribution tools, I think it's a huge play, and I think it's going to take Microsoft back to where it used to be at the top. And I think Google is probably have to play some catch up to do that. So I think it'll be interesting to see how this is going to play out over the next 2 years. And also, what is Facebook doing? What is Meta doing? Right? What is Apple going to be doing as well? We haven't heard about them ever since ChatGPT came out, and I'm sure they use AI technology in many ways in the back end that we don't even know about. But on the front end, you and I as consumers don't get to see anything just yet. So I'm hoping that over time, Siri and the HomePod and all the other properties and tools and hardware that Apple has will then incorporates some of the AI possibilities that we're now seeing with ChatGPT and other things. And I think that's going to be really exciting. Imagine Apple having all this technology available with all the devices that are already out there with iPads, iPhones, Macs. Man, that would be so insane. So I would love to see Apple get into the AI wars as well.
Yeah, I am stock in both, so no bias here, but I just think Microsoft is just crushing it right now. Like you said, the power moves that they are doing is really impressive, and especially since I always say that Outlook is Outlook and Microsoft 365 are the biggest productivity apps out there. The more Microsoft does, the bigger productivity ripples are going to happen. So yeah, Microsoft's just killing it these days. Now, speaking of a company who hasn't been killing it these days as much, the second news item I wanted to talk about is Evernote. So we talked about this a few episodes ago, but Evernote has released a bunch of updates, but at the same time, their management team has left. So Evernote has started rolling out post their acquisition by Bending Spoons. They've rolled out new lock screen widgets for iOS. That's something people have been waiting for. They've also released a great feature. If you've connected Evernote to your Google Calendar, you can now embed a note into a Google Calendar invite. So it just says share note with participants. So you can send an Evernote note to participants right from within Google Calendar. That's awesome. But on the flip side, the CEO of Evernote has left, as well as a lot of the management team and older key employees. Now, this is no big surprise in an acquisition, but I guess people were noticing it when the CEO's LinkedIn and Twitter, the bio started changing to former CEO of Evernote. And the former CEO has been really active on LinkedIn saying goodbye to all the employees and stuff like that. Yeah, Tan, you already shared your opinion on the Evernote buyout in, I think, TPS446, I'm going to say. But what do you think as far as features of Evernote? I think it's notable that they've really been focusing on their links with Google Calendar. What do you think the future of Evernote features are going to be that can really make them make a difference, you think?
I think the future of Evernote doesn't look that great, to be honest, just because the competition is so strong. And there's just so many options that are available right now that whatever features they're releasing right now, like the iOS lock screen widgets and the stuff with Google Calendar, it's almost like 2-3 years too late. Like they should have added this stuff 4 or 5 years ago so they could have been ahead of the game and been competitive and also relevant. But the fact that they added it now in 2023, it's too late. Like most tools and apps already have this stuff built in. So why is Evernote making such a big deal out of this? With the acquisition, Evernote being bought out and having new management, it's not a surprise that the CEO left and that key players left. That typically happens when a company gets acquired. So it's up to us to now wait and see what's going to happen with Evernote over the next 6 to 12 months. Evernote has a huge user base. It has been around for a long time. And I'm still an Evernote user myself, so I'm curious to see what's going to happen. I'm going to be paying careful attention, not only for myself, since I'm a premium user, but also for everyone else that listens to the Productivity Show and follows Agent Efficiency. Because we're on the fence right now whether we should recommend Evernote or not, because one of the competition that is out there, but also two, post-acquisition, we just don't know what's going to happen with Evernote. So I wouldn't recommend it quite yet, where you migrate everything to Evernote and then lo and behold, maybe 6 months or 12 months later, you have to move everything over to another software now because maybe the new tool is just not that great anymore. So I'm in a wait and see pattern right now with Evernote, and I would recommend that everyone does the same thing. If you do need to switch for whatever reason to another note-taking app, like Notion is a great one, OneNote is another one. Apple Notes is even really good nowadays, so there's plenty of options you have available.
All right, let's get into some of the productivity topics we want to talk about. And as always, I'm bringing them as questions for you because I'm really curious your thoughts on some of these things, Tan. Just for those of you who are listening, want to know, these aren't things that Tan and I collaborate on necessarily. I ask Tan questions, he asks me questions, and we don't really know what the other person's thinking because I think it makes it more fun that way. So the first question I want to ask is, do you want to record everything on your computer? And by everything, I mean pretty much everything. There's a new tool called Rewind, and at least as of right now, it's Mac only. Who knows, that might change. But their tagline is they call it the search engine for your life. And apps come and go all the time, so you might not really notice it, except that it raised $10 million from Andreessen Horowitz, which is one of the biggest VCs firms. So obviously they see something big here. And basically the idea for this app is it's like time tracking on steroids. So there are apps that track what you do on your computer, but this isn't tracking what you do on your computer. This is recording everything, literally recording everything you do on your computer. So it records your screen, it records your mic, it records your meetings, and then it transcribes and OCRs it all, makes it all searchable text, so that the idea is you can basically make your entire technology life searchable. You never need to think back and say, what was that article I read about mountain climbing or whatever, or what was that tip I read about fixing my Zoom settings? Like, you don't need to go searching around for it in Google or Bing. Now, you just need to search your own history and it's right there. And you never need to think, hey, what did Tan say in that meeting that we had 2 weeks ago? Because the entire meeting I had with Tan was recorded and then the text was transcribed, so I can just search back and find this meeting. Now, there are, of course, privacy controls. You can choose not to record certain apps, and if you open a private browser tab, it doesn't record that. But other than that, everything else you record, everything else you do in your browser is recorded as long as it's not in a private tab. Now, supposedly, the data is only stored locally on your computer, so it's not supposedly being uploaded to the cloud. And the data is compressed, so they say it doesn't take too much space on your hard drive. Now, it's not cheap. It's $20 a month, so I would say you really have to be into this stuff to try it out. And there are some legal issues, too, as far as I'm concerned. I said before that it's recording all your meetings, but do you have to give the other people permission that you're recording them? Not exactly sure how that's all going to work. When I'm looking at the reactions to this online, it's kind of like almost 50-50. People are like, this looks awesome. What a great tool. I want to make my life searchable. That's number one. But on the other side, it's, you got to be kidding me. There is zero chance I'm ever letting anything record my entire computer for privacy reasons or whatever. So I'm curious what you think, Tan. Do you think are you in the awesome camp, or is this like a Jurassic Park situation where just because you can do something, it doesn't mean you should? Or is this like the future of productivity apps? What do you think of Rewind and making your entire computer life recorded?
I think the promise of Rewind to be the search engine for everything you've ever done on your computer is a great idea. And when I first saw it, I thought, wow, like this is something that I personally would use. And yes, I do have privacy concerns, and yes, I do have storage concerns. So when I first came across Rewind, I said, okay, let me do some research and figure out how this tool actually works. And my first concern was, what about all the storage space? If you're going to record literally every second of the day, how does that work then? So apparently on the website, they make a claim that they have this compression technology that can compress stuff 3,800 times. In other words, you can take a 10 gigabyte file and store it as a 3 megabyte file on your computer. And so I thought, wow, that's really impressive. Like, I wish more apps would have that kind of technology available. So that, to me, seems very impressive. The other concern I had, which is privacy related, is the same thing that you just said, right? If you're having a meeting with someone, do we need permission from the other person to record this? And I would say yes. Ideally, if I'm being on the end of the recipient, if I am in a meeting and I don't know that I'm recorded, I would feel violated in that sense. So I would actually like to know that I am being recorded. And so to me, it makes sense that if we're having a meeting and I'm using Rewind to record everything, that I should tell at least the other person that this is being recorded. I think that's very fair. But also maybe you can do it the opposite way too, where you tell Rewind not to record anything when you're using the app Zoom, and then maybe flip it around and such, and maybe they can toggle it in such a way. I actually don't know because I haven't tried the app yet. I just looked at it from like a product hunt point of view because it's really popular right now in product hunts. So as I was looking up rewind.ai on product hunt, I just noticed all the positive comments and I went, wow, like a lot of people seem to really like this idea. A lot of people seem to really like this idea of an app that is literally the search engine for everything you've ever done. So I've been in many situations where I was listening to a song and I went, oh my gosh, what was that song again? And if I could just type in a few words and the search engine would show it to me, I'd be like, okay, that was totally worth it for me. Another time when I'm reading an article, if I didn't save it, yes, I might have to go to my Chrome history and then have to figure out like what day did I read this article, what website was that on. But my browser history can literally contain hundreds of items in a particular day. So it's not very efficient in that sense, and I can't search based on text. So having that stored, especially if it's so compressed and easily accessible, to me seems like a no-brainer. And since I don't do any crazy stuff on my computer, I would say if it's locally stored and it doesn't get uploaded, then I would say, yeah, I would totally use Rewind for personal use.
I think they were smart charging a pretty high amount right from the start too, because the worry of something like this, especially with all this VC money, is that, okay, they're doing all this, now what creepy stuff are they going to do to monetize it? But if they're charging $20 a month right from the get-go, that kind of relieves that kind of pressure. So, I don't know. I will say I'm more on the Jurassic Park of this sort of thing, but I'm really curious to see if there's going to be any growth here. I know it's super popular on Product Hunt, like you said, but I wonder if this is really mainly appealing to the type of people who know what Product Hunt is and are into the productivity space, but I don't know if it's going to make the leap to quote unquote normal people. So we'll have to see. I'm curious. Maybe we'll revisit this in a future episode to see how Rewind does. I think if they do want to make that jump, they've got to go to Windows, and that will be a whole other thing.
I think I'm going to have to disagree with you here because I think $20 a month sounds on the surface like a lot of money for an app or tool, which is $240 a year, which I'm sure if they price it, it'll be like $199 a year or something like that. But imagine if your time is worth a certain amount of money, right? How much time would you save if you could have a search engine for everything you do on your computer and you thus be able to find anything within seconds? Which takes away the need to organize a lot of your information, because now you don't have to worry about organizing your stuff. You just need to get good at searching. And you and I both know we can save multiple hours a week by being really organized and being able to search for everything. But I think Rewind can take that a step further and go, hey, you don't actually have to organize anything as long as you know what to search for. As long as you know how to use the search parameters, you can probably find anything you need in 5 seconds or less. And I think that promise would make $20 a month like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, I guess maybe what we'll do is revisit this. This is TPS446. Maybe what we'll do is revisit this TPS 550 and see and see what's going on with this kind of record everything space. Yeah, we'll see what happens. All right, speaking of apps, let's move on to the second topic. And it's another question, which is micromanaging your life with an app even a good idea? And what triggered this for me is an article in Vice called that, Is micromanaging your life with an app really a good idea? And it's a pretty clickbaity title, I'll definitely say that, but I actually thought the article was pretty even-handed. And basically, it talks about how there's all these apps, and some of the apps it mentions are like Jira, which we use at AE, Todoist, which is super popular in the productivity space, Trello and Notion are all mentioned. And the idea is there's so many of these apps out there, but are they actually helping us? And by the title, you might think the article is going to take the negative side, but actually the answer seems to be, yeah, for many people, they actually find these productivity apps, these task managers, these to-do apps really helpful. And it gave examples of people who actually find that these apps help them with their mental health because it gets the stress out of their mind. It's like the whole David Allen thing of how your mind is a factory, not a warehouse. And by getting this stuff out of your head into a trusted system, it really gives you calm and helps you focus. The other side of that, though, is it says that there are two different types of people. It makes a distinction between task manager people, so to speak, so the type of people who use these type of apps, and dreamers, which are people for whom planning and scheduling are just like anathema, like they just have no use for these type of apps. And there were some takeaways from this article I thought were interesting. So, for example, it actually said that task managers or to-do lists actually have really low penetration. Like the CEO of Any.do, which is a popular task manager, says task managers only have 5% market penetration, which is low to me. And the Todoist CEO says something which I totally agree with, which is that most people actually don't use task managers and to-do lists very well. What they do is they load them up with tasks to do today, and then they maybe only do a third of them. So they push them forward day after day, and all of a sudden they have 100 tasks to do today, and they just give up. I'm curious what you think of this, Tan. First of all, do you agree that task managers and to-do lists, despite the fact that we talk about them on the podcast a lot, have a pretty low penetration? And what do you think of this distinction between task manager people and dreamers? I know we've had both on the AE team, but what do you think of that? Do you think it's that kind of cut and dry?
So when I came across this Vice article on micromanaging your life with an app, if it's a good idea or not, my instinct was, yes, it is a good idea. And as you go read the article, it talks about, okay, people who organize their time versus people who are dreamers who just simply don't know how to plan or be proactive. And I use the word proactive because it immediately made me think of the two camps of people who are being proactive versus reactive. Now, in the article, they talk about people who are in performance roles, and those tend to be users of calendar apps, of to-do list managers or task managers, and all these different productivity tools. And then you have people who are reactive, or people who are just really busy, or as they would say in the article, dreamers, but don't really do anything other than just doing the work that needs to be done, especially when it's handed to them. And for most people, especially if we work in a corporate setting, most of the work is handed to us. We're being told what to do. And then there's a smaller group of people that is proactive and saying, hey, yes, I know what I need to do, but I also want to work forward and look ahead. And sometimes we are intrapreneurs or entrepreneurs where we have to create something from scratch. And then you do have to have that foresight and skill to say, hey, where I am today is not where I want to be 2 months from now, 3 months from now, or a year from now. And it takes a little bit of planning and organization to do that. And so having tools to help you with that, to speed up the whole process, makes a lot of sense. So when I was reading the article, naturally, I was the person that was being described as, yes, I'm in a performance role. I'm the founder of a company. I'm leading a team. I'm leading a business. But also, I'm being measured by my performance as well. So using tools like Jira, Todoist, Trello, Notion, Evernote, whatever you're using, makes a lot of sense. And so for those who don't use any apps whatsoever, can you still be productive? Absolutely. Yes. You don't have to use productivity apps to be productive. You can do just fine with pen and paper and get everything done. However, to me, there are a lot of disadvantages to that because you can't organize a lot of information. You can't organize your stuff while you're on the go. There's no syncing of devices and information. And oftentimes information is stored in silos. And so you have to go to a particular silo to find your information. So for example, if you write stuff on sticky notes, if you're on a trip somewhere, good luck getting access to that sticky note because it's at home, right? Versus having stored stuff in the cloud so you can easily access stuff and find stuff. So it's a double-edged sword because it also makes people feel overwhelmed and feeling like they always have access to everything, and it makes it hard to disconnect and rest and recover. So there are things you have to learn, but those are all skills that people can pick up, and hence why we created a course called 25X Productivity System, where we teach people the 25 skills to master productivity. And there's a lot of the stuff that I talk about where you actually don't need a lot of the apps. We actually recommend only 3 in particular that you need, and everything else is a skill that you have to develop if you want to be more productive. And we have found that there's essentially 25 skills that everybody needs if they want to be masters of productivity. If you just want to have a good foundation of productivity, you probably need 7 to 10 skills or so. And planning is one of them, being organized with your time, being organized with your energy, making sure you're focusing on the right thing. These are all skills you will need, and you don't necessarily need an app for that. So the basic premise of the article I do agree with. And in the Vice article, it also talks about how the market penetration for to-do list apps or task managers is really low. And I would agree with that, because if I look at my friend circles who are not entrepreneurs or not in a performance role, if I look at their MacBook or their Windows computer, most of them use Outlook or use whatever is default with the operating system and just figure out a way to use it. Or they use the tool that's being forced upon by the company, and they don't have any additional tools or apps that they use to help them move stuff forward. And so I'm not surprised that maybe 5% of the market is taken up by these productivity tools, because my eye test in the real world says that's probably true. So I'm not surprised by that. And most people, if they're not entrepreneurs, if they're not high executives, if they're not in a performance role where they're getting paid a lot of money, you'll start to notice very few people actually use to-do list apps.
One thing I saw that was interesting too is they included Trello and Kanban into kind of the task management bucket, where in our experience, a lot of times, if people don't respond well to using a to-do list, like a checklist, that type of thing, a lot of times they don't respond well to that, but they maybe do respond a little more positively to things like Trello and a Kanban board, because it's more visual. You're not listing things out and checking things off. You're moving cards around. But I thought it was something that, at least in this article, for many people, even that's too much. Even that's too much structure. They just don't respond well to it. And I guess what you're saying about people who just don't use this stuff, they just manage it out of their email inbox or whatever, it's still a big thing.
All right, let's wrap up that section here on dreamers and move on to the third part of the podcast here. And this is actually a question I have for you, Brooks. So Meta, or formerly known as Facebook, declares 2023 as the year of efficiency. So the founder, Mark Zuckerberg, recently laid off 11,000 people. And if you look across the tech industry in general, there's been a lot of layoffs this year. And it's not a good look for the other industries are following suit. And whether we're in the recession or not, I think everyone can agree that the economy is not looking that great. However, Mark Zuckerberg said that 2023 is going to be the year of efficiency, where they're trying to flatten the curve and the structure of their company, but also making sure that there aren't that many managers anymore, that there's a lot more individual contributors, and that people are being forced to be a little bit more productive than they used to be. And if that's not going to be the case, then he's going to ask you to simply leave, or you will get fired, essentially. So it's a nice way of saying, hey guys, Meta has become a little bit fat, a little chubby. We need to trim it down a little bit, not eat too much food and enjoy the good life as much. We need to work, and get stuff done. And if you are not in line with that, then maybe this is not the right company for you right now. And he's trying to turn Facebook around, or Meta around, to be in a place where we have high performers. Decisions are made more quickly. It's not as slow. Projects are going to be moving forward a lot faster, and they want to be more proactive about cutting projects as well. And so how does this apply to you? How does this apply to everybody else that's listening to the Productivity Show? I'm curious to see, what's your take on this? Is 2023 going to be the year of efficiency for Meta and Facebook alone? Do you see this applying to other companies on an individual level? What do you take away from this?
I definitely think it's going to apply to a lot more. I was just seeing on social media how, this note has gone out to managers at Meta, like you said, and they basically say, you need to become an individual contributor. So if you joined in to be a manager and your only thing you do is manage people, you better learn to code or something, otherwise you're going to be out the door. And that's Meta specifically. I think that's where we got this title from. But I definitely don't think it's just going to be these big tech layoffs that have happened, Meta, Google, pretty much everyone except Apple, at least so far. It's not going to be just that. And actually, I'm laughing, but this is a very relevant topic for me that I don't even think you know about, Tan, which is that my wife's company last week, in fact, it's their very own year of efficiency. So my wife got laid off last week, and it was the same thing. It wasn't a performance thing. It was exactly what we're talking about. Her position was eliminated, and she was director of marketing, and there is no longer going to be a director of marketing. They're getting rid of that whole layer. And I think, and this is still a big public company, so I'm not super surprised that it's happening to them too, but I do think that this is something that is going to happen more and more. And I think the kind of like end point of this is that I think a lot of us are going to essentially be tasks with doing more with less, whereas maybe there used to be 2 or 3 people doing something. Now the same amount of somethings is going to happen, but it's going to be one person doing it. And so to me, the year of efficiency, I'm not Meta or even Zuckerberg's biggest fan, but I think year of efficiency is actually a pretty good way to put it, because I think a lot of the productivity stuff we talk about is going to become way more important now, because we're all going to have to do way more with way less. So I think this is going to be a good time to up our productivity skills.
First off, I want to say I'm really sorry to hear that your wife got laid off. This is news to me. I'm hearing this for the first time as we're recording this. So I'm really sorry to hear that, because that's definitely no fun. It puts a lot more stress on the family, I'm sure. And that's something that nobody wants to see happening, of course. But hopefully on the flip side, she'll find a new gig, new job, and hopefully some new fun co-workers as well. And hopefully all the productivity advice that you've been giving her will also translate into the new gig that she's doing, and hopefully will bring a new level of excitement to the family as well.
Oh, it's all good. I told her that the first time I got laid off, which was in 2001, I used my severance to buy her engagement ring. So now 21 years later, I told her it's time for some payback. So I'm expecting like at least an Apple Watch, right? That seems reasonable. I'm not asking for diamonds here.
I think an Apple Watch made out of seems very reasonable. Or you
think
get
so.
the Aura ring that is like a little bit of a diamond on it. Nothing too crazy. It makes complete sense.
Yeah,
as well.
I'm not asking for much, right? Sure, an Ultra, Apple Watch Ultra, that seems reasonable, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, you might just have to settle for the AirPod Max or something. But
Yeah.
I think there's worse things to have in life. But to the article, I think I have a couple interesting takes on this. One is with the economy flattening or even going down, people still debating whether we're in a recession or not. Typically, when a recession happens is when, the economy goes down, but also a lot of like bad stuff is being filtered out. So companies who are extra fat are being lean. Companies that just add no value or aren't really doing that much are going to be taken off. And so it filters the whole market in many ways. And I think that filtering has to happen every now and then. And I think that's a good thing, where the bad companies just go out of business and the good companies stick around and if not thrive even more. So I think it's going to be a natural process for that. And I think the people side of that is just a byproduct of that too, right? So like if people are working at a company and the company doesn't really add much value to the marketplace, then those companies just have to be shifted in a different place, whether it's a different company or a different role or do something completely different altogether. So on the high level, I don't think it's a bad thing. Of course, when it applies to us personally, we don't want to be on the receiving end of that. And the other thing I would say to this also is with the economy being down and people being laid off and then us being expected to do more, it also makes it easier for people to stand out. And what I mean with that is if you're the type of person who's be able to take on extra workload and get the stuff done because you are effective, because you are efficient, because you know how to use different skill sets and tools to be efficient or agent efficient, as I like to say, you automatically stand out from everyone else and you're automatically being more valued by the company as well. Like the companies don't want to lay off the best people. They want to keep the best people, obviously. And how do you be the best? Obviously, you want to be productive. You want to be efficient. You want to be known as somebody who's organized and getting stuff done. So I think our industry in particular is going to benefit from this in the next 2-3 years. And from a high level, I think as long as we can teach and educate people about how to be more productive and stand out in a good way, everyone is going to be benefiting from that. So if you're the type of person right now where your company is laying off people and you're taking on a lot more responsibility and work, hey, this is a great time to learn about productivity, implement the stuff you hear about from us on the podcast, take on additional courses, learn about this stuff, because there's no perfect time for this ever, but if there's a time, I would say right now is like a great time to, one, get ahead of the curve, because I don't see the downturn changing quite yet. I think we're still on a downturn overall in the world and as the economy is moving forward. And so I'm even behind the scenes working a lot more too. Like I'm working on the weekends more. I'm staying later because I'm seeing like, hey, there's this like window of opportunity where things have to go fast and move forward. And like, I want to make a bigger impact on the world, but also I want to grow Asian efficiency as well. And I'm working a lot more than I used to. And as part of this, just the economy that we have going on. And I hope everybody that's listening, if you're in that situation as well, where things maybe aren't going as great, like now is a great time to pick up the work, do the work. You might have to do things you're normally not used to doing, right? Maybe you have to do stuff that used to be below you. And don't be afraid to do that. Like, I remember I was watching this video by Patrick Bet-David. He's a big YouTuber talking about business and politics. And he had this video called something like, if you're a realtor in 2023, here's what you must do. And even though I'm not a realtor at all, I watched the video just to get an insight of what he was suggesting. And he said, because the economy is slowing down, you have to be willing to do stuff you would normally never do. So if you're a realtor who's used to selling $1 million homes because it's a certain clientele, it's a certain commission that you get, maybe now as the economy is slowing down, you have to start selling homes that are like $200,000, $300,000 just to make some extra income. And don't feel like that's below you to do that. And I thought that was really good advice. And so it made me think about, okay, as the economy is slowing down, there were certain things I would say, hey, this is something I typically wouldn't do because, quote unquote, I would feel like it is below me. But over the last, I would say, year or so, I've shifted my perspective. And I said, you know what? As the economy is slowing down, I have to be willing to pick up things and do things that I would normally say no to because I felt like I was too good for it, or I'm like way too far ahead, or it's not worth my time anymore, yada, yada. And said, you know what? No, I am going to do a lot of that stuff where I used to think I was too good for it, because this is what we need to do now to keep things afloat and to move things forward and to grow. And as the economy is tightening up and there's less opportunities, we have to do these type of things. And so if that's something that resonates with you, I hope you consider doing that as well. What are some things you can think about, like that you used to never do, but might have to do now moving forward to keep things moving?
All right, Tan, if somebody wants to have their own personal year of efficiency, which hopefully does not involve getting laid off, what is one action item you want people to take out of this episode?
Yeah, we've talked about a lot of different things here, but whether it's AI to year of efficiency to recording everything on your computer, I would actually recommend that you pick one app that we've listed here, and we've mentioned a lot of different apps, but if there's one particular app that stood out to you, go check it out. Whether it's Rewind, whether it's one of the task managers, just go pick an app, try it out for a few days and see if it would help you. Like I said, it's not required to have productivity apps, but I know a lot of people like apps because they're very helpful and they can oftentimes make things be more efficient. So if there's something that you heard and you went, oh, that sounds really interesting, go implement it. Speed of implementation. That's something we always like to advocate for. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find links to everything that we talked about today in the show notes by going to theproductivityshow.com. Another reminder, we are on YouTube, so you can find us on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search for The Productivity Show or search for Asian Efficiency, and you'll find us there. We release new clips every single day of the podcast, so we're going to get bite-sized information for you to help you become more productive every single day. So find us on YouTube as well. And we talked about like and subscribe. And thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.